The people that have been managing this secret all the way back to the 30s and even further back, they've always been in control of what information is going to be publicly disseminated. They are the ones controlling this process. Their people will never know, will never know their names, will never see them. They won't be on TV. They won't be testifying. And there's very, very few of them left that actually have the complete bird's eye view of all of it. We are going to get their version of disclosure, which is the narrative they want us to hear, and it is going to be designed in many ways to protect them from the things that they've done and to continue to deceive humanity about the broader implications.
My next guest spent 15 years pointing a camera at people whose job it is to say nothing. Officials, scientists, military insiders, they said more than they meant to. They told the truth by accident. He went on to make Accidental Truth UFO Revelations, which won 28 film festival awards, was cited by name at the Congressional UAP hearing, and has been called one of the most important UFO documentaries ever made. He holds 42 national awards, sits on the board of directors of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, is media relations director for MUFON and co-founder of MUFON Television, the world's largest collection of commercial-free UAP programming, and his sequel, Accidental Truth, Next, Beyond the UFO Disclosure, narrated again by Matthew Modine and featuring Thomas Jane, drops June 2nd on Amazon, Apple TV, Google Play, and YouTube. Ron James, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. That I hear people read that stuff and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of stuff.
When I was looking at it, I was like, oh my God, this guy's like, it felt like the Chuck Norris meme, you know, just like more and more outlandish kind of attributions. I guess it's all been very organic for you over your lifetime to kind of jump into all of those different areas as opposed to it being one decision to do it all.
Yeah. And you know, you got to be humble that you're actually allowed to do those kind of things.
Right, yeah. It can feel very blessed sometimes, right? I remember as a 2-year-old kid watching X-Files, wishing I could one day investigate UFOs. And here we are as adults talking about UFOs and, you know, circling, I guess, going to the world's biggest gathering of UFO, I would say believers, but I think it's the wrong word, UFO experiences. And you know, truth realizers, I guess. And it's really quite cool to have grown up into, you know, the thing that I wanted to be when I was a kid. Do you feel the same?
Absolutely. And, you know, these conferences are so much fun, and people that haven't been to them, they don't realize the dedication of the people that go to these.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many kind of interesting connections and bridges that you build in these spaces that you'd never build, you know, online on social media networks as connecting as that can be these days. It's very different being face to face, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, people are just so kind. We're in a field where people aren't always kind to each other, and the internet is so easy to be more abusive towards each other than we are in person. So when you get people together, it's always a good thing.
So you have a really interesting background as well as what I read out. I read that you produced concerts for Guns N' Roses, the Smashing Pumpkins, Earth, Wind and Fire. You built a Microsoft Kinect Dome for the Super Bowl 2 years running. What? Yeah. Wow. Like what a man of many talents. Talk to me about that.
Well, you know, at the core of it all, I own a production company. So, you know, we get hired to do things. And, excuse me, I've been doing a lot of podcasts, so I'm a little hoarse. One of the coolest things that I ever got to do was I was doing a lot of 3D work back when it looked like it might make a comeback. And so I got hooked up with a company that was producing 3D concerts. So I ended up I got to work with Guns N' Roses and Smashing Pumpkins and Earth, Wind and Fire.
So cool.
And all those guys. And so, you know, I was at the highest levels of the production, so I got to meet them and hang out with them. It was really fun. I was actually on stage with Guns N' Roses for the entire concert that we filmed at the Hard Rock. So that was really something.
Yeah, there's not many people that can say they investigate UFOs. Doubly so for people that say they investigate UFOs and can hang with Guns N' Roses on stage whilst they're playing a concert. That's pretty damn cool. It
was pretty cool, I have to say. And you know, people are like, "Oh, you didn't really do that," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, I did." If you look at the Guns N' Roses movie, it was called Appetite for Democracy. They had a residency at the Hard Rock, and it was a concert film, and it was the biggest 3D production ever done. We had a truck, and we were running 3D cameras to this truck, and it was more 3D cameras on one event than had ever been done at the time. And my name's right there in the credits, so it's it's hard to disprove. Cool.
I bet there was a point in history James Cameron was looking at you and wishing he could have those accomplishments with the 3D work. Do you think there's any opportunity?
Yeah, I think that point in history never happened, but that's okay.
Maybe it was a second long. We'll take it. We'll take it. Do you think there's any opportunity for kind of like 3D visualizations around experiences and experiences?
Well, the 3D production didn't come, every time it's come into the public, it somehow fails. And I took a big risk that it was going to succeed. I literally started a 3D company. I bought very expensive 3D cameras, but it does have a place now with the advent of, VR and virtual reality and augmented reality. And I know that Blackmagic just came out with a new camera that is made just to shoot for Apple Glass. So but now we're doing so much stuff with CG that is natively 3D in domes, and that's kind of where it's going. So the need for 3D in the real world is still pretty minimal. But I will say that I was producing dome content, kind of like what you see at the Sphere, way back when, and that's when I got the chance to do the Microsoft stuff. I did Constantine for Comic-Con, a lot of dome productions when they'd have big events and they'd deploy these domes at these events, and so we got to do a lot of that stuff. And I still keep my hands in the augmented and virtual reality productions.
That's so cool. I hope that they do something like that for Disclosure Day when that comes out. There's a big opportunity there for making an incredible kind of visceral, immersive experience.
Yeah, we just have to see what is the experience he's going to be sharing with us. Everybody's waiting with bated breath for that third act.
Right, yeah. Do you have any sense of, when I watch those trailers, knowing, Spielberg's history and knowing what Taken was like, I kind of think like, oh wow, this kind of almost looks like the final chapter of Taken / Close Encounters. What do you think? What are your theories for Disclosure Day?
I think that Steven Spielberg makes movies. And I think that, people are hoping that this is going to be some big eye-opening film, but it's not Hollywood's job to disclose the secrets of the universe. We're going to get a cool movie that's fun to watch that probably has a lot of elements of truth, but it's not going to be some kind of society-changing revelation. And, if you look at the pattern of the history of his work, they've been great movies, but I can tell you, from working with MUFON has never had a UFO-related report that involves somebody building a giant mud castle in his house. We've never had a UFO-related report that involved reindeer with birds perching on their antlers breaking into the rooms of experiencers. And we've never had a UFO report regarding an extraterrestrial riding a bicycle. So at the end of the day, get ready for a great movie, but don't expect too much out of it, really.
The big believers are out there right now going, ouch,
yeah, but, look, I have the ultimate respect for Steven Spielberg, and I do believe, contrary to what he says, that he's certainly had people whispering in his ear over the years. But is it going to be the be-all, end-all that changes the whole face of disclosure? I hope not. if the biggest deception and the biggest question facing humanity has to be solved by a movie, what does that say?
That's so true. And I've seen a lot of people speculate like that the Roswell footage and the trailer is real footage, but you can go on IMDb and find the actors who are acting in that kind of flashback footage. So I'm with you, and you saying that puts you right in my you're my people, Ron. And you're not afraid to say it like it is.
Yeah, I get myself in trouble that way, but it is what it is.
Being in trouble for the truth is a good thing. So you kind of got into the UAP subject, I think in 2008. You were hired for a conference, and you say you just kind of got the bug. And ironically, that's kind of, you made Accidental Truth. That's an accidental origin for you. So that's perfectly fitting. What was it about that first kind of moment that grabbed you?
Well, I was always kind of an armchair aficionado of the UFO topic. I watched the same shows that you probably watched, and I was moved by Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods. It's actually still to this day the only UFO-related movie that's had a mainstream, long-term theatrical run.
Rest in peace.
A few have tried, but... So I was into the topic, and I was a big fan of Nick Pope back in the day and Stanton Friedman, because I kind of saw them as being sane voices of reason in a pretty crazy field. Nick was in the military and Stanton Friedman was a bona fide scientist. And so I looked up to those guys. And then Steve Bassett came through Sedona, where I was living at the time, and we met and I interviewed him. And when he found out I had a production company and I could do live streaming, he brought me in to do his X conference. And so it was there that I got to meet all these guys that I'd seen on TV and grown up with and was a fan of. So all of a sudden there's Nick and there's Stanton and there's Richard Dolan and there's all these people. And I can't remember where I first met Eric von Daniken, but he became a friend. And when I really got to know these people personally, I realized that they were all engaged in trying to help humanity decipher the biggest question and the biggest deception. And I thought, if I'm going to have a company that produces media, what's the point of just doing all this nonsense? Discovery Channel comes to town, I get to carry their gear. Who cares? I want to do something that makes a difference. And so I took on that field, and I took on Life After Death and the Nature of Reality. And what's interesting is this new movie kind of combines them all. But those are the topics that I try to cover with the stuff I create.
That's amazing. And that's not a small thing to bite off either, right? And it's not even a project. It sounds more like a calling of sorts. Like that's such a big thing to tackle. How did that feel on the other side of it? Like now, obviously, you've kind of digested a bit, but did you ever think like, whoa, how the hell am I going to tell this story?
I know that when I was doing this new movie, the entire third act, I knew the film that I wanted to make, and I certainly got the right people to do it. But I do remember I was staring at this just going, how am I going to get this across? And I literally, one night, I was just staring at the computer screen going, I'm not going to be able to do this. I can't, because I had, dozens of hours of interviews that I had to distill down into 30 minutes and have it be something that made sense. And this film it's going to break new ground as far as the things that it asks people to think about. And that's hard to do in this field. And Accidental Truth was a hard act to follow. It did very well, and a lot of people thought it was good. And so there was a lot of pressure to come up with something that was going to be just as good, if not better. And I still don't know if I did. It's coming out June 2nd, and I will live and die on that sword, I guess.
Well, I will tell people that it's very thought-provoking, and just like good sci-fi, I want to come away from UFO documentaries thinking about questions that I haven't come across before, and it hit that spot for me really, really well. So you put it together brilliantly. But before we jump...
So you actually saw it? Did you get a chance to see the screener?
Cool. You guys sent me a screener, so I watched that last night, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And similarly, I studied film and, kind of worked for the BBC at Pinewood on The Last Harry Potter and stuff like that. And that stuff's, the amount you shoot versus what ends up in the edit is crazy. Documentaries is exponentially more so crazy. So hats off to you, Ron.
I know. Well, there's like almost 30 people in this doc, and that's a big no-no in documentary land. Some of them only make one appearance. And then, you've got a background in film, so you can see that I try to make things that don't look like anything else. You want to be original, you want to be creative, you want to have fun. And this theme that I created for these interviews, the last time I built custom plates off of a photograph of my actual studio for Accidental Truth. On this one, we went into Unreal Engine and we built a model of a top secret government lab where every UFO from the Leonard Stringfield cases was spread out among this giant lab, and there's scientists walking around and soldiers with guns guarding spaceships. And that's all this background that these people are in. And, it's like, what amazes me is that nobody has like said, dude, that was a stupid idea. They just, they accept it, they watch it. And I have had very little complaints. Some people get mad that there's too many people milling around in the background, but at the end, that and the, the whole artistic theme, and shooting everything on green screen, I do that just so that I can put these people wherever I need them in interviews and productions in the future, but it doesn't always end up with the best color work. So, it's a Ron James style production. It's got its flaws, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. So
I like
you
it
for
when
the compliment.
I really love it when creative projects have flaws, because that's where you see the human behind them, I think.
Yeah, the first Accidental Truth had it got released with multiple typos, and I couldn't pull it back from the distributor. I got it fixed when I took it to a different distributor, but it won 28 festival awards with all those errors, and I was just like, I can't believe I did that. So this one, I was determined to not have any typos, but I'm sure there's at least one or two.
Yeah, I'm sure
I do these things myself. A lot of times you'll see a film like this, and there's 20 people in the credits that did all kinds of different things. I shot this. I designed the elements. I wrote the script. I did the editing for the most part. I did the whole thing. So there's certainly going to be mistakes.
There's so much work, and I hope people listening to this can appreciate that. Usually you look at a channel like, American Alchemy, Jesse Michaels, and you can see the production's great on there, but there's a full crew. That's an expensive production. They clearly have lighting guys, camera guys, everything. But then when it comes to just one person shooting, you've got to look after all that stuff yourself, as well as, like you say, script write, do the post-production, do the distribution. There's so much access these days, but it also means so much more work to kind of get your head around as an independent creator.
Yeah, we're doing the marketing now, and I've got some people there's more people helping me with the marketing than help me with the film. It's kind of funny.
It's the way it goes. Have you?
What's really cool, Dan, that I haven't told a lot of people. The soundtrack from this, it was done by Alan Howarth, who wrote the music for John Carpenter's movies. He did the Halloween movies. He did Christine. He did Escape from New York. He did The Thing, and he's probably best known for being the guy that created the sound effect of the hoverboard in Back to the Future. That was him that did that. And so to have such an accomplished, Hollywood music royalty come in at the last minute, somebody was watching the trailer and they said, that music sounds like Halloween. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's the same guy. So that's coming out on Sony Music, believe it or not. They're releasing the soundtrack. So that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. There are so many kind of quiet, understated, brilliant people that are in this subject. I love when James Fox talks about his movies, he talks about Walter Murch helping him edit. And I'm like, Walter Murch is a Hollywood heavyweight. Everything we do with editing kind of comes from him. And there's a great book called In the Blink of an Eye that talks about how we edit like we dream. So that even when you look at the technical film stuff, there's that element of consciousness kind of slipping into how we understand visual media, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's just fun. And let me ask you something, since you've seen the film. I've had a few people say that it should have been 2 movies, because of all the directions it takes. And I'm like, look, this is my personal adventure that started in my journey to Washington to explore disclosure. And the path that I meandered down took me to where this film ends. And you're kind of coming along with me on my own path to discovery. And I didn't want to make a movie that's about me, and I hope I didn't. But I really wanted to give the viewer the sense of adventure that I had in the journey of making the movie. And so what do you think? Did I pull it off?
I think you did. And it's funny because that journey that you went on from that nuts and bolts to, ending up at the spiritual and the consciousness whilst going through the anomalous materials, that's very much the same path as I went through in this subject, starting really dry and then kind of getting more into the woo as you kind of go till the point where it's undeniable, right? And all the best UFO media, books, films, whatever, they all kind of take that journey as well. There's a great book called Earthlights Revelations, which is just a look at the data through the ages about Earthlights. And they don't necessarily say they're UFOs, but they say, these would be to blame for UFO reports, but farmers would set their crops by them. So it's clearly a repeatable, studyable phenomena. And then you get to the last chapter of the book and it starts going into, okay, well, there's the dry data out of the way. Now let's explain how these balls of light are responsive to people, how they seem to play, how they seem to communicate. And they end up at the woo again, even after this kind of really big dry data run of like 90% of the book. And I think that's a fascinating kind of journey. And I wanted to ask you a question on this that I had for later in the interview, but it's perfect right here. How do you, as a filmmaker, there's a journey that you want to take people on, but there's also a kind of story that you're presenting, trying to convince people that aren't necessarily kind of down the same path as you. How do you kind of stay on the right side of that line between like advocacy and just telling your journey? Or do you even care about that line? Are you just like, this is my journey, take it or leave it?
Well, it's interesting. When you're making a doc, you want to try to be fair and present all sides and do all of those things. And you don't want your own belief system to be what you're trying to force on the audience. And so I just present the stuff. Like the first Accidental Truth movie was nothing but facts. In fact, nobody ever refuted anything that was in that movie. And we laid out really the history of the legacy programs and the deception and how it started and how it evolved. And it was never challenged. And I also did it in such a way that I never denigrate. People were on camera lying in that movie, but we never denigrated them or made fun of them or made them bad people for doing what they really thought was their duty and their job. And so that was a fine line to walk, is to present that. In this new movie, we're not trying to take a position. We're showing what happened in Washington, D.C. and the things that were conveyed and the adventures that we had, and the whole thing about, getting Lou Elizondo to spill the beans about Lockheed Martin is just such a fun thing. I mean, it's kind of like, hey, we got to go to the hearing. Yeah, we got to hack the hearing and actually engineer the outcome from the back of the room. If I told that story and hadn't documented it, nobody would believe it.
Right, yeah.
Because it's so preposterous that we were able to do that. And so, again, there's no agenda to put something to make people believe something. We're just telling a story of things that actually happened. And then when we get to the materials sections, again, there's conjecture in the film about what this stuff is, but we're not trying to convince people. Like the material that's glowing, and you see it in the trailer, Benny Foggin says that came from a flying saucer. Maybe it did. Arrow says it's just regular piece of aluminum with nothing fancy about it, but years of testing have said otherwise. We're not trying to convince the viewer that that's material from an unknown origin, but what we are telling is the story of our encounter with this material, the things we went through. We proved, we documented it, and then we present that Arrow thought it was nothing, and we present that others thought it was something. And so the story about that stuff is the material itself and what it's been through, and the number of people that are just literally willing to lie about this material, and the number of people that have tested it. So that's the story. And then some of these other things, hey, it's just like, hey, this is weird. We don't know what to make of it, but here it is. And then when we get to the end of the film, I'm not trying to make anybody believe anything. We present all kinds of things simply as food for thought, because as we say several times in the movie, we're not asking the right questions yet. We don't have the vocabulary to describe what we're seeing in applicable ways. So what I invite the audience to do as they get into the last part of this movie is not feel like I'm trying to impose some kind of belief on them, because I'm clearly not, but to go, wow, I never thought of it like that. Wow, I should think about this. People have said, Ron, this film doesn't resolve. And I'm like, well, it's not supposed to. I cannot resolve you to the deepest questions and answers of the universe. All I can do is maybe open your eyes to some new possibilities and get your own thought process going. So I've broken a lot of rules of filmmaking, documentary making, and everything else. We're just going to have to see how it goes over.
Well, you touched on something important there. Like pretty much every UFO documentary, every paranormal documentary, they never resolve because, any one's about ghosts. They don't just film a ghost at the end of the documentary. And, it's not like a Hollywood movie where the ghost kills everyone and there it's definitely real. this is a bona fide mystery that kind of says, well, the water's warm, get in, help us figure this out. That's kind of the case you're making, right?
Yeah. And the thing is that for people that are really, they're watching YouTube and they watch all the UFO shows and they watch all the podcasts and they've already heard what people like Rizwan Virk and Diane Hennessy Powell have to say. They might be like, well, yeah, we've already seen this, but this is the first time it's been blended into a discussion with this cast of characters. And for the mainstream public, my goal is to just make it a real mental journey for them.
Yeah, no, I think you do that brilliantly. I felt the same coming out of this as I did coming out of Nope, where I was like, that was really entertaining. And I have 1,000 questions that I didn't have before I started watching this. So yeah, I mean,
that's the other thing is I want it to be fun to watch. And people have told me that it's actually a really good watch. People have said that the first Accidental Truth was dense and just a 1-2 punch of information. And this one's that way too, kind of. But at least we get out into the field and we're away from the talking heads and we get to see people doing things, and that's cool.
And that's really where it sings, right? Like, and I imagine your work with MUFON kind of pushes you in that direction. I'm in Albuquerque right now, and I've been working at the UFO archives and going into the desert and finding Diana Pasulka's gifting site and things like that. And those things are so much more gratifying than sitting on social media arguing with a stranger that might be a bot,
Right, for sure.
Have you ever had a personal experience?
Not in the way that normal people would describe. I kind of, you're talking earlier about how we all kind of have a sense of mission here, and I kind of think that one of the reasons that I'm here on this planet doing the work I'm doing is to take these very complex concepts and distill them down into such a manner that everyday people that don't spend a lot of time on this can wrap their heads around what we're trying to say. And if I was an experiencer that had been through some of the things experiencers have been through, I don't know if I could be objective, and I don't know if I could fulfill that role.
Yeah, absolutely. In that way, you're kind of a messenger. And I had Thomas Jane on not too long ago, brilliant guy. And I loved his work anyway. But the second that he starts talking to me about Donald Hoffman, and my eyes light up, he recognizes that I'm, a fellow very well-read UFO geek. And we just went ham on the depth of the subject, and he's amazing. And we spoke a little about, and I kind of want to hear your take on this too, but he's someone that's part of that Hollywood machine, kind of facilitating stories and narratives kind of being told and pushed out. And I always think, well, if there are others here kind of changing hearts and minds and trying to reach past our kind of social constructs, then people like Thomas and people like you and people like me doing this show, we're all kind of a part of those tools and methods that other would use. How does it make you feel that you might be being used as a messenger?
Well, I'm not really sure I feel like I'm being used as a messenger, because I've never had somebody try to steer me in a direction of delivering a message, except maybe unseen forces. If I am delivering valid messages to humanity, and I've tried to do that through my work, then that's nothing but an honor. And, people that stay in integrity through this work, like Thomas is one, they're the people that matter the most, because excuse me, the UFO field has turned into, all of a sudden there's money to be made. And so now we've got the sharks are circling. And in Hollywood, it's like every other guy is trying to figure out how to exploit the field. And, at the end of the day, that's why we started the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance with Dan Harari, is to promote, truth in UFO filmmaking. And so we've done pretty well with that. But Thomas is amazing. The way he ended up in the film, I actually met Thomas. He narrated Sirius, which is Dr. Greer's first movie.
Sure. Yeah.
And for a long time, Dr. Greer hired me to live stream his red carpets. So I would be the guy with the microphone, and my production company would be the people with the cameras, and we'd be at the theater where the film was having its premiere, and we'd live stream all the interviews and stuff, all over the world. And I don't know if he's using me anymore, but he used me all the way up until the very last one, which was cool. But that's where I met Thomas, was at Dr. Greer's premiere. And We kind of lost touch over the years, but then when the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance came back in, they billed us for each one of us to give a lecture on the same day. And Thomas came up and gave his lecture, and it was all about AI and the advent of that and some really wild theories about it. And then I realized that the film that I was already making dovetailed into what he was saying perfectly. And I pulled him aside after the lecture and I said, we're doing very similar work. Would you interview for my movie? And he agreed. And I'm like, wow, this is great. I got basically a big actor. We got Matthew Modine narrating. Now I got Thomas Jane actually in the film, which is a lot of gravitas for a UFO documentary. Yeah. And Thomas and I have become friends. I'm going to help him on some other projects in exchange for what he did for me. And it's just a real pleasure to know him as a friend and to have him involved in this movie.
Yeah, it's so cool. When I had him on, we were talking about his work on The Expanse, the proto molecule, and how that's kind of an allegory for this.
He was so good on The Expanse. There's another movie where he played this farmer that killed his wife. I can't remember the name of it. It was like 1925 or something, where he had to take on this whole accent and stuff. And it was just absolutely insane. His acting was incredible.
Yeah, he's an incredible actor. And even more amazing that he just says, I'm not an actor, I'm a creative that happens to act sometimes.
Yeah. When I first met him, I didn't realize how into the topic he was. He kind of downplayed it. But this is a guy that's put a lot of thought and mental horsepower into his own journey and trying to figure this stuff out. And so he's, you meet a lot of actors and they're not super deep. But Thomas is deep and thoughtful and intelligent. And it's great just to hang out with him.
Yeah, absolutely. When I get to Contact in the Desert, me, you, and Thomas are going to have some great conversations at the bar.
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell you that. Drinks on me. So we've had the Grush testimony. We've got the Trump declassification order, and I say declassification loosely because we haven't heard that word in paperwork or, from his mouth. He's just said, give over the files. We've had Obama saying on record that aliens are real and then walking it back. From where you're sitting with your access and your research, does this feel like actual progress towards the truth or managed release?
Well, I believe it's been managed release since 2017 when Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon came forward with these 3 videos, which incidentally, it's been almost a decade and that's all we still have.
Sure.
I think that the powers that be and the people that have been managing this secret all the way back to the 30s and even further back, they've always been in control of what information is going to be publicly disseminated, and they are the ones controlling this process. Their people will never know, will never know their names, will never see them. They won't be on TV. They won't be testifying. And there's very, very few of them left that actually have the complete bird's eye view of all of it. And so I believe that this has been an organized rollout. And the thing that's really sad about it is that we are going to get their version of disclosure, which is the narrative they want us to hear. And it is going to be designed in many ways to protect them from the things that they've done and to continue to deceive humanity about the broader implications of this. So we're only going to get so much out of Washington, D.C. And that's why we have that broken record in the movie and also in the trailer. Is I was spending a lot of time in Washington. I delayed the film over and over again because there's going to be one more revelation, one more hearing, one more witness. And I just dragged my feet for 2 years working on this thing. And I finally just got to the point where it's like, okay, enough. We're only going to get so much. And of course, now that the film's done and turned into the distributor, now they'll probably come out and give us some kind of disclosure. And I'll be like, darn, I should have waited a little bit longer.
It's the way it always goes wrong. We recorded a news show yesterday after delaying for like 2 weeks because Trump's been like, I'm going to release it this week. It's this week. It's this week. So we've just been delaying and delaying and delaying. And now we finally said, all right, screw it.
But, people ask me how it's going to get rolled out a lot. And my prediction in the past was that the first thing we're going to get is acknowledgement that they found life somewhere other in the universe. And
do you think like microbial or like arms and legs?
And we got the Mars acknowledgement last year.
We did. Yeah.
So, okay, great. So now we know that life can exist on other planets. So I thought that was going to be the first thing. And my prediction for what we're about to get, although I'm hearing, from Luna and Burleson supposedly talking to pastors and all this kind of thing, that they're going to actually reveal aliens. But my guess has always been that they're going to come out, they're going to show us some weird videos. They're going to say they don't know what they are. They can't rule out non-human intelligence, but they can't confirm it either. And they don't know, and we don't know, and let's all find out together. It's looking like maybe we're going to get a little more than that, but I still stand by my prediction that we're certainly not going to get the whole truth.
I'm kind of with you on that. Like, I think they're going to downplay it. We'll get hey, yeah, we're not alone, but it's not an immediate concern, and we don't really know what it is.
Right.
And in some ways, for me, that kind of makes the disclosure worse because it's pretending that we don't know whilst kind of the parents have more knowledge. Do you agree with that? Like, does fans talking about demons, for example, make this worse than just not knowing?
Well, it allows everybody to cling to their own specific corner of belief systems. In the new film, we talk about this is that, non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity since there's been a humanity. And it's in all of our religious teachings. Nobody, if you want to call it angels, demons, whatever you want to call it, from a religious standpoint, you can. But I think that there's a much broader explanation. I will not deny the theological beliefs that what we have come to recognize as angelic and demonic forces could be operating on the same capabilities within reality as other things, but they're not the sole purpose of non-human intelligence interacting with us. And so I don't know this debate just needs to stop, and people need to be a little more open-minded and acknowledge that instead of saying they're angels and demons and that's it, blah, 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 or they're not angels and demons, they're extraterrestrials, they're interdimensional beings, they're the Palladians coming through. It's like, quit fighting. All of these things could be true. A lot of it depends on the filters that we're looking at it through, and the fact that people have to just cling to one certain corner of the ring it's actually causing more harm than good.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's almost like people are holding on to what we already know, and that's kind of problematic because like when NASA sent up the Viking missions, and they thought that there's a group of people that think that mission found life, but the way that they tested those microbes actually would have destroyed the life that they found. And so we're just left with this question, right? And some people don't even want to ask the question, which is kind of foolish.
The designed the experiments for the Mars rover or for the Viking missions. By his own experiment, they found the traces of life, and then they changed the definition of the testing so that they could still be inconsistent. And to this day, I did a segment about this in one of my shows. To this day, he still says, "Wait a minute, we found life on Mars," and he still advocates for those test results to be re-examined.
Yeah, and back when it was found, that declaration was seen as crazy. Whereas now I think, I was talking to a brain surgeon not too long ago, a couple of months back, and I said to him, do you believe in aliens? And he said, I think it's a really interesting question. And he said, whenever he introduces interviews assistants that are going to help him in the operating room now. And this guy was like tippy top, paid a lot of money to kind of do brain surgery. And he said he always asks them when they come in, what is your most controversial non-consensus view? And sometimes they'll say, I don't know what you mean by that. And he'll say, well, what about aliens? Do you believe in aliens? And he said it kind of just reveals something about the person. But he said the question he's going to have to start changing because 99% of people were like, well, yeah, we see the James Webb pictures and it's almost a terrible assumption now to say that we're not alone. It's not crazy to think we're not alone in the universe anymore.
Well, it's true, Dan. People now, we have a whole generation that grew up on Ancient Aliens. This stuff has been part of the culture for a long time. And even before then, back in the 50s, we had very similar things happening to what's happening now in the political spectrum and in the media. It's almost a repeat performance. But very few scientists now would say there's probably no life in the universe. Most agree that the universe is probably teeming with life. They differ on whether it's coming here or not, but the existence of life is universally accepted. And most people are open to the idea. They know that that life probably exists. They know the government knows more about it than they're telling us. And they know that there is probably an element to our history that is not completely understood. And most people, I would say, confidently say a majority of people would sign off on that at a discussion over dinner.
Yeah, I think so too. You said something interesting there too about a repeat performance. And when you look through the history, you know, like you say, you go to the 50s, the 60s, there's nothing new about this modern disclosure movement that hasn't been said or done before. And I wonder if, you know, every now and then they just roll it out and they see the reception. And when the reception is good, they like push further. Do you have a similar kind of intuitive read on it?
Yeah, we talk about it in the very first Accidental Truth movie. It's, you know, it's such a bad repeat performance. And so they hired the same screenwriter and he didn't bother to change the script. You know, we had military guys coming out saying there's things flying in the air. We don't know what they are. We had military guys like Don Kehoe saying there's aliens, there's reverse engineering programs, there's flying saucers. We had congressional panels. The Robertson panel convenes to look at this and whitewashes it. We had just like Arrow, we had Project Blue Book come up and say, oh, we're going to get to the bottom of it. And it was just a disinformation campaign. And we had tons of books written about it. We had all kinds of witnesses. It was a huge topic in pop culture. There were TV shows. And you know, people don't remember this black and white world where all of this happened before that is happening now. And truthfully, we're not getting anything new that we didn't get, you know, 75 years ago.
Yeah. That's so true. I'm glad you said that. And like when you look at Blue Book and stuff, you know, these, just like Arrow, we're meant to be looking at the magicians who are feeding us like with contradictory lines and making us argue about it and so on and so forth. And when Blue Book was happening, we had the Battelle Corporation running their own UFO investigation. We've never seen squat from that. You know, like we've seen everything from Blue Book, but we don't know what Battelle kind of came out of that with. And I've always wondered, you know, do they gather the information and then poison the data, give that to Blue Book to explain away, whilst Battelle kind of, you know, has some semblance of a pattern to kind of follow and to track these things and to study them?
Pretty much. You know, I'll tell you something that's not in the film that you'll find very interesting. The material from Benny Foggin, the metal that we took and delivered to Congress, he first turned that in to some people that were running an ad in an Ohio newspaper. And it was, if you've had any encounters with UFOs, please reach out to us. And they were pretending to be a civilian UFO group, kind of like a little small MUFON. And so he turned the materials over to them. He played hell getting them back. But it turned out that this group was actually a front group for Battelle Memorial Institute for a secret UFO study that was happening there. And their job was to go out and front face and gather information from the public. And one of the guys that he interfaced with was Bill Moore, who turned out to be a famous disinformation agent. This guy was actually working for Battelle and later went on to be a director for MUFON in Ohio. And it just shows, you know, how the intel community will infiltrate these organizations. And, you know, by the way, that's no secret that happens for people that want to think MUFON's.
Hello to anyone watching that works in IC.
Of course we're being watched. Like, yeah. But so yeah, Battelle was conducting these studies and experiments all the way back to the pre-Roswell days.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really eye-opening when you get into the history.
The lab that tested this material and said there was nothing to it, that was Oak Ridge Labs, the ones that tested it for the government. Well, they're managed by Battelle. And we already know Battelle had this material once before and didn't want to give it back. We know the NSA studied it. We know NASA studied it and actually took off some very strange red material that was on the surface of this thing and returned it without the material anymore. We know Lou Elizondo and Tom DeLonge had it because they went to the guy's house and took it and made a TV show about it. It's been studied by the Discovery Channel. And then, you know, the whole thing in the film where I'm asking Gary Nolan about it, you know, that segment speaks for itself.
Yeah, absolutely. The material stuff is interesting because it really does get beyond I'm always asking, do you believe? And I'm like, I don't have the luxury of belief. This isn't about belief anymore. Like, I know there's something there, and these materials are that kind of writ large, right? There's something you can hold in your hand that doesn't make any sense. Are you going to tell me that you presume to know the answer to this? Like, that's just as bad as me fully believing it's ET, right?
Yeah. And coming up with materials cases, we've got 3 of them in the film that are legit. I mean, am I saying that there's some kind of extraterrestrial element to this? No, but are they examples of very strange, anomalous materials that have stood up to scrutiny, still can't be explained, that come with very strange stories? And, that people can make up their own mind what that is, but this stuff exists. And the government used to do a really good job. You say the government, but, I'm talking about whoever is managing this information.
Like Air Force, Oak Ridge, those specific
they've done a really good job in the past of making sure that this stuff gets swooped up and taken out of the public arena. But it's happening so much now that they can't keep up with it all. There's weird stuff coming up all the time, and experiencers are now receiving souvenirs. It's like, and I think part of it is to bolster their stories, because you can be an experiencer and say you've had an encounter and people cannot believe you. But if they left you something on your living room floor and you had it tested and nobody could figure out what it is, then it gives credibility to those stories.
Yeah, absolutely. There was kind of a somber moment that I had in your movie, seeing Nick Pope. And whenever we get into consciousness and spirituality, we're always thinking about the afterlife and what comes next. And Nick was famously atheist, so his skin will probably crawl with me talking about him having all the answers now. But how did it feel to maybe be the person who gets to share Nick Pope's last word on his beliefs and what the journey he's been on?
Well, I do know that Nick was doing some interviews with some British media people between the time he announced to everybody that he was terminal until the time he actually passed away. So there is some more contemporary Nick Pope that'll probably surface. But as of now, I think this is his last major doc that he appears in. And just to say a word about Nick, he was one of the people that inspired me early on. He used to write a column for UFO magazine, and before I was even into the topic, he was still with the Ministry of Defense at the time he was writing this column. And I used to think it was so cool that here's this guy, he's in the military, and he's talking to the UFO community like we deserve to be talked to about this.
Right.
And not, making fun of us. He was a friend to the community. And then, and he always remained that. And when I got to do that first X conference was the first time I met Nick. And over the years, I interviewed him, I think 7 or 8 times. He's been in every major production that I've produced. And he became a friend, and he never said no to an interview. And I put him on the spot a few times over the years, and he was always a good sport. And so, I'm happy that he's in this. He says some things in the film that you've never heard him say anywhere else, especially talking about reality and consciousness. And so I think people that miss Nick are in for a treat.
Yeah, I think so too. It was a pleasure to be able to reveal that Calvin picture to Nick. I work with the team in the UK that kind of found that and revealed it. Yeah, seeing his face when we were able to say, Nick, is this a real one? And the clear kind of joy on his face, but also knowing that because of the Secrets Act, he couldn't just say, yes, that's the one. He just had to go, that looks, really, really similar to the one on the wall. Kudos to Nick. We wouldn't have found that without it. So I'm curious about the MUFON stuff. You're media operator for MUFON, which means you kind of see the global sighting data in a way, I don't get to, basically. So what are the current trends? Like, are sightings increasing? What are we missing by not kind of seeing that data, the bird's eye view?
Well, there's been a lot of talk and speculation about these unidentified submersible objects. And we've got Enigma saying that there's thousands and thousands and thousands of reports. And I don't know where they're getting their data. We're not seeing that. We're seeing, and there's certainly always USO sightings, but credible sightings are there's more of them, but there isn't that vast quantity. And
Sure.
we get a lot of. I'd like to be able to say, oh yeah, dude, there's all kinds of weird stuff happening that hasn't been happening before. We don't know what it is, but the more mundane truth is that 94% of every UFO report MUFON gets is something that we're actually able to explain. But hey, it's that 6% that matters.
And that's consistent as well, right? Even in Blue Book, they were like, yeah, there's 5-6% that we can't explain. Arrow has kind of said something similar, and they downplay it, but like you say, that 5-6% is consistent, and that's what you guys are looking at, whereas they're trying to make you look at the other stuff.
Yeah, and we're all these groups have popped up. I'm not going to name names, but there's a couple of them that are for profit. They're going out and soliciting UFO reports. So what they're really doing is helping to dilute the data, and then the data that they're reporting, we're not really sure that it's credible. So anybody out there, I encourage you, if you want to report your UFO to an organization, report it to anybody you want, but make sure that you report it to MUFON too, because we have the oldest and largest database. And if you pour coffee into 3 cups, you end up with 3 cups of coffee that aren't a cup of coffee. And so as people file UFO reports and they're just fanning them all over the place, especially to people that are building apps and trying to charge money and doing all this stuff, it's diluting the data. So, MUFON's the largest and oldest organization studying this. We're the only organization that has boots on the ground all over the world where people will go out and actively investigate credible UFO reports. And we're the people you should be talking to.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's something I've noticed, being at the archives here and looking through like the NICAP and APRO files, side by side, is that these files, they're not consistent. And you've got to be able to, have access and look at these primary sources instead of. So a good example was I was sorting through the APRO bulletins, and I saw the first report of Travis Walton's story, and tonally it was so different to how we talk about it now. And there's so much kind of speculation that have trickled in as part of the story. And it was really cool to go back to those primary sources in history and kind of get rid of all that noise,
Yeah, it's fascinating. That story still stands the test of time. A lot of people want to discredit it. I know Travis. There's no benefit ever that he got from being that guy that tells that story.
Yeah, absolutely. And those early reports, they don't have a mention of, the National Enquirer running a UFO story competition and then being aware of it and stuff. They're just reporting this shocking thing that happened to them. And that's something that just goes through, you look at the Kaikara lights in New Zealand, that one. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
People are just, their mind is blown. They can't get their head around what they're seeing. They're not just kind of going, oh yeah, I'll make a couple of bucks out of this. No,
and that's to this day one of the best documented UFO encounters. I'm familiar with that because I was I did a piece on it in one of my TV episodes that I was doing for a show I do called Space Time, and trying to remember, this is terrible. I can't remember his name. The scientist that studied that, and he passed away recently.
Know who you mean, but also there are so many people to remember in this subject, right? That it's difficult to keep it straight. I'll let you off.
Well, it'll come to me in a minute.
Yeah. Probably at like 1 a.m. tonight, you'll text me and be like, it was this name, I remember. That's the way it goes for me. So
my favorite part of having finished the movie is entering film festivals and winning awards. And the first Accidental Truth movie won 28 specific awards in about 15 different film festivals.
Yeah.
And some that won a bunch. But I started entering Accidental Truth even before it was finished, or this new movie, Accidental Truth Next. I uploaded a rough cut, and then I kept refining the upload through the festival process. And so now this is the time where the trophies are starting to arrive, and you go out there and, oh, look, there's one. So like we've won 9 so far. This is Best Feature Documentary from the New York Movie Awards for
Congratulations.
The new film, Accidental Truth Next. This is Best Feature Documentary for the Hollywood Gold Awards, Accidental Truth Next. This is the International Gold Awards, which is a similar festival. We won the Gold Award for this. So, yeah,
that's amazing.
Attention.
And you're going to be showing this at Contact in the Desert, right?
Yeah, it's going to be the day before it comes out. It comes out on Amazon, Apple, and YouTube. And that's on June 2nd. And on June 1st, we're showing it for anybody that wants to be there. It's the world premiere. And there's going to be a lot of films there. Corbell's movie is going to be there. Jeremy Corbell.
That's right. Sleeping Dogs. Yeah.
That's going to be interesting. Darcy Weir's premiering a film there. And I think they're going to be showing S4 or something.
Yeah, that's right. S4 will be shown. Yeah, the Bob Lazar one.
So mine's like the day after the conference officially ends. So I'm the low man on the totem pole at that event. But you know what? I don't
I
even
wouldn't
care
say that.
There's just so many of us that are doing good work.
And they're all on-ramps, right? They all bring people on board this subject. We need as many on-ramps as we can get, because it's difficult to speak to people in all of these different kind of disparate areas. And that was something I wanted to ask you about, actually, with, you start kind of in Congress, you go to the materials, and then you go to the kind of what people call the woo, the spiritual and the consciousness. That's a really difficult journey to kind of take. And especially if someone isn't into this subject, kind of follow that. Like, how difficult did you find to jump from the nuts and bolts to the woo whilst keeping it kind of compelling for people watching?
From the very beginning, when I decided to make a sequel to Accidental Truth, at first I was just going to do a director's cut and call it a day. But I realized that there was more story that needed to be told. And the breadth of my work covers these other topics, life after death and nature of reality. Some of my very first Bigger Questions videos that I put out in the 2000s were the nature of reality, the psychic matrix, the fusion of science and spirit. And so I knew that sooner or later these things were going to dovetail. And then I began to realize that they have to dovetail. That's the thing that's the most interesting, is that you cannot explain any of this without broadening the conversation to encompass these other elements. And so the biggest trick to me was, how do you put this together in such a way that your everyday person can understand, and that you're not, totally shattering people's belief systems and pissing them off. And then, this journey's been very convoluted for me. It's like, it's been an exploration, and the things that I've had to explore to even come up with any kind of a clue to what's going on are the things I present in the movie in a linear fashion for everybody else to explore. So in a way, my journey, is everybody's journey that's going to look into this. And so we can all take it together. And going from nuts and bolts to the edge of the cosmos in one film it was a job. I'm super happy that I think I pulled it off. But, a lot of people would say, dude, you start here and you end there, and we don't get it. But I get it. And most people that watch it, they get it, and they understand why the film does what it does. And to me, that's immensely rewarding, to sit in an audience and have people not questioning the journey and how it's laid out, and just accepting it and enjoying the ride is super gratifying. And I hope when it gets out to the public, it's the same way, that the broader population will enjoy the journey, and just go with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I really loved about it, actually, is it's very rare now. Like, a UFO documentary will make a case for it's XYZ. And for me, that's always a red flag when someone says what it is, because really none of us know. And I always say, take things seriously, hold them lightly, and just follow the path. So I think it's very commendable that you kind of showed your journey without any kind of mask or censorship on it, and just said, like, this is it. This is what we found. Isn't it interesting?
It's really fun. And yeah, so hopefully people like it. I'm on pins and needles, literally. It took too long to make. I had people saying, dude, you got to get this thing done. And then I'm like, it's going to be done when it's done. And I thought it'd be 6 months. It was 2 years. And
you still beat George R.R. Martin, right? So you're good there.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's like, I had to let it breathe. And I was discovering things that I had to process. That whole last section of the movie is not something you just cobble together. That took me months of thought, going over pages and pages of transcripts and going, how do I distill this down to something that's going to make sense when none of it makes sense.
Right.
So there was a few times when I was literally staring at the computer screen, and I broke the last part of the film into sections, just going, how do I even do this? And yeah, it was a journey of it's like I said, it's my journey, and now it's everybody's journey that wants to watch it.
That's beautiful. And it also speaks to the fact of, whether it's Trump or whether it's someone else that's going to stand on a podium and say, like, ladies and gentlemen, we are not alone. How the hell do they explain this in a 10-minute press conference? You almost have to dilute the truth to even get to like a 10-minute press conference.
Yeah. And, like I said, I'll say it again, where there a lot of hope that we're going to get, yes, there's non-human intelligence. Aliens are real. This is what we know. I still think that they're going to say they don't know. They're going to say non-human intelligence probably exists. We suspect it comes from here, here, and here. Here's a bunch of weird videos of things flying around jets, but we don't know what they are. And we're going to continue to get that. These rumors about Burleson talking to pastors and saying that, religious theology is going to be blown out of the water. I doubt that that's going to happen, but it would be.
Have you heard his follow-up?
It is, because that means that we're going to get some kind of, real disclosure and not just another whitewash story. But I'm not holding my breath. And if they do it, I hope they wait till after my movie comes out, because, the last time David Grush, there's a 3-month window from the time you finish a movie until the time it gets released by the distributors. And that 3 months is just a nail biter. The last time we got David Grush, I released the movie, and then all of a sudden David Grush pops up, confirming everything that we said in the movie. And I'm like, if I would have waited 3 months, I could have had him in it. So yeah, it's like, you don't want there to be that spoiler that, your movie becomes obsolete the day it gets released. So I hope they, right. Just for my own selfish reasons, I hope they just calm down and take their time. Wait till after Spielberg's movie comes out. Give us, wait till after Disclosure Day.
It almost feels like, constantly chasing the shiniest new iPhone or, whatever phone, whatever technology you buy. Like, by the time you pick it up, the new one's out and you feel like you've missed the kind of boat. And, we just touched on that theology thing with the pastors. Grush has come out this morning and kind of blown that out the water and said, actually, it was a civilian UFO group, and they're kind of taking it out of context and speaking about it like it's the government briefing them. But they're making a mistake. So, literally, Grush in the past 24 hours has done exactly what you were just saying he did.
Yeah, because like I said, my prediction again is that I shouldn't say it 5 times in your show, but they're going to show us some videos. They're going to say they don't know what it is, and they're going to not rule out non-human intelligence, but they're not going to, show us pictures of Roswell. So in a way, I don't want to be proven wrong, but if I'm proven wrong by real UFO disclosure, there's worse swords to die on.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I just don't think it's going to happen that way.
I pretty much agree with you. Like, they're going to get us to the point where we don't care. It's kind of like lobsters in a boiling pot, right? When they reveal it, they want us to kind of go, whatever. I still got to take my kids to school tomorrow, and I've got work tomorrow, and the world must go on. I think that's what they're trying to get us to.
It's all the context. If they came out and said, hey, there's probably intelligent life all over the universe, we have evidence of non-human intelligence interacting with us, they're not bothering us, we're fine, they exist, then everybody's going to go back to their day. But if they come out and they say, hey, there's all these different non-human intelligence, they're abducting people, they're experimenting with us in our DNA, we have no defense against them, we don't know what they want, then that's going to have a different effect. So people used to say, we can handle the truth. And that was just a generic, broad statement. And in my opinion, now it's more like, it depends on what the truth is. I don't think we can make that broad statement of humanity's ready for the truth without knowing what that truth is.
I'd agree with you there, Ron. That's very wisely put. I have a listener question for you. This one comes from Attitude of Aggression, who is not aggressive at all, actually. Very, very nice guy. He says, what do you most want the audience to take away from this sequel? Thank you for your work and your time.
One of the underlying themes in the film is that we're not asking the right questions yet, and we don't really know even what those questions are. So what I want people to take away from the film is the overarching understanding that we have to figure out what we're even asking. And that's why the whole last part of the film is segments on different things designed to provoke thought and invite the audience to become part of the conversation so that we can come up with the vocabulary to describe this, the understanding of the universe and reality to describe this. This is something we all have to do together. So what I want people to take away from the film is I want them to still be thinking about it hours, days, and months after it's done, after they're done watching it.
Well, it has been about 24 hours since I watched the movie, and I am still thinking about it, not just because I'm talking to you, Ron, but also because you asked some really thought-provoking questions. And the question that I always come back to, and it's the name of this show, so I'm going to ask you, you've gone through so many people that are behind the scenes on this, kind of, letting them reveal themselves through a camera lens. And there's something interesting about that lens and the way that it kind of helps people drop their guard, right? You see it on YouTube shows like The Hot Ones, where they just eat chicken wings with hot sauce, and it kind of just completely breaks that wall down. And I think you do something similar. And so I'm curious, after talking to all these people and kind of being behind the scenes and being in MUFON and seeing all these reports and these trends and kind of things like that, and not having the noise of social media, what do you think it means to be human?
I think that, I've been studying this a lot. And if you would have asked me that a month ago even, I would have had a much clearer answer. But, now I'm working with J.J. Hurtak. I don't know if you are familiar with who he is. He wrote a book called The Keys of Enoch, and he's widely regarded as a major contemporary spiritual leader. And he speaks of a cosmology that I have not been familiar with. And if anything, I've tried to shy away from it. I have always been of the mind that we are spiritual beings who come here to have a human experience for whatever reason, rather it's to learn, rather it's to experience, to develop our souls, so to speak, and in an environment where we can do that. And then, we take whatever that we've gained from that, and we return to source, and we just evolve as independent spiritual creatures. Now I'm hearing all these stories about how, there's archons and there's all these different levels, and you're just spiritual soul manure that's being recycled. Your entire life is meaningless because they're going to take you and wipe your memory and spit you back down here in a wheelchair. And it's like, well, that sucks. It sort of takes the whole meaning of everything out of it. And so I think I'm going to do a special podcast addressing multiple cosmologies and bringing in people to talk about it. I've interviewed all the people in the near-death experience field that have written major books. Obviously, I can't say all, but I've interviewed a lot of them, and I have a full-blown doc ready to be finished. But now it's like it's a whole different thing. I used to think what it means to be human is that we each get our own spark of divinity, and we have that to evolve over many lifetimes through many whatever. And now it's like, it's a real downer to think that we're just instruments of some other force. So I'm exploring that and trying to come to grips with what that means and if it's even true. And frankly, Dan, I don't believe it. I don't believe that our life and our existence is that meaningless, that we're just, a cosmic farm. Have you heard about certainly you've heard about this, the Gnostic stuff, I touched on the Book of Enoch in the archons, and that if you go into the light, it's really a way of processing and recycling souls, prison planet, all that kind of nonsense. I've always regarded it as nonsense. And then somebody called to my attention, well, you should take a closer look. There's probably some truth to it, as always. And mostly J.J. Hurtak and his books and the stuff that comes out of Enoch it's not exactly that, but it's similar. And so I've had to kind of step back and look at things that I'd previously dismissed. So when you ask me what it means to be human, I hope it means something, because there are those who will have us believe that it doesn't, and that's very scary.
That's wonderfully put. I heard it put once that nothing that we do matters, so the only thing that matters is what we choose to do. And you know, it's a glass half full look, and I think we're similar in that regard, Ron.
Yeah, I just don't want to believe that. I think, especially, you know, if you live your life like a psychopath and you don't care about anything and you lie, cheat, and steal and murder and kill your way to the highest source of power, well, you know, that kind of approach to things would be justified in a world where nothing that we do matters, and that as soon as we're out of here, we're just erased off the data block. And those of us who live in integrity and live by a code and have things that we won't do for money, and you know, try to evolve ourselves as a stand-up presence for things we believe in. If that whole cosmology is true, then that's a pointless endeavor, and we're just fooling ourselves and probably not having near as much fun as some of these other people. So, you know, it's very sad if true, and so I just don't believe it. But I'm going to be exploring that more in my future work.
How interesting. And I love that you're exploring something that you find challenging. I would put that to everyone, to explore things they find challenging in the subject and really get to grips with them, because it makes all the difference.
You know, people that are living their lives here and they're not spending a certain amount of time trying to puzzle their way out of why we're here and what we are, I guess it's okay. I can't tell people what to do with their time. But to me, you know, the biggest mysteries of life deserve far more of your attention than the latest episode of the Kardashians. And so, you know, at the end of the day, I encourage people to look inward and start looking for those answers, because inside is where you're going to find them. And then you have to check with, you got to check with the system after you think you found the answers to make sure that you have. And even then, maybe you haven't.
That's beautifully put. Thank you. We'll wrap there. But thank you so much, Ron, for coming on. I hope everyone goes to see your movie. Like I said, it's going to be on all streaming platforms June 2nd, so you can enjoy it there. And, you know, check out Ron's work. Do you have a website, Ron, where people can go and kind of see, you know, what you've got up and coming and things like that?
Most of my stuff is on MUFON's YouTube channel and MUFON Television, obviously, MUFONtelevision.com, but that's a subscription site. So you have to join MUFON to get access to it, which everybody should do anyway. The website for the new film is accidentaltruthnext.com. You can see the old Accidental Truth for free on YouTube Movies and TV. And they picked it up after it had been out for about a year. And they've been very good to me. So when I say you can go watch it for free, I'm perfectly glad that people can watch it for free, and I still get paid a little bit. Helps me make my next project. So yeah, check out the first Accidental Truth, and then buckle up, because the second one's going to take you for a very interesting ride, I hope.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Spotify or on your chosen platform. If you could like, share, or subscribe, that would be very much appreciated. It helps us find our tribe. If you'd like to support the show and get access to a 1-hour live chat each month and early ad-free access, you can find us at Patreon. Just follow the link in the show notes or at our website, tobehumanshow.com. And feel free to reach out via the contact page or email at hello@tobehumanshow.com. As always, remember to be curious. The universe is bigger than we know.
What It Means to Be Human is a double-barrel production. This week's episode was produced by Roz Mugford and Dan Zetterstrom. Sound post-production by Parker Mosley with technical support from Dale Mugford. Our theme music is by Thunderbird.